In today's video, we have the latest trade talk around the Ottawa Senators still pursuing defenseman Jacob Chychrun. Plus, we have the latest on the Philadelphia Flyers and the Winnipeg Jets. Could be two teams to watch closely, especially if they have a slow start to the season. Plus, we have some more signings and some rumored signings and UFA news to talk about as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we've already been NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at here today. First up, some news that just broke a short time ago before I hit the record button here. MSG Sports has hired Henrik Lundqvist, the longtime Ranger, will be working in New York here again, working in a new business operations role. So he has seen comments from him saying that obviously that was like home to him and obviously what he felt was right to do. So Henrik Lundqvist once again associated here with MSG. We have a couple of other news items when it comes to some UFA news and some potential signings we might see. For one, that's actually a sure thing. The Edmonton Oilers have signed Justin Bailey, but it's only a professional tryout contract. So Justin Bailey will attend Edmonton Oilers training camp on a PTO. Kevin Weeks has had some cryptic tweets last night looking at some Montreal Canadiens news, some of which has kind of been already announced today, but it wasn't really the direction he was taking us. But I've seen other NHL reporters kind of second what he's saying here. Last night he was on Twitter indicating that the Montreal Canadiens were about to be giving us some goaltending news, and he indicated that it was a likely contract extension coming for Jake Allen, who's entering the final year of his deal. Instead, so far today, we've got the news that they've signed RFA goaltender Cayden Primeau to a 3-year, one-way contract. I did do a dedicated video on that earlier today because I also wanted to explore how that was going to impact the rest of the goaltending situation in Montreal. Of course, we have Carey Price, who's making tons of money but not able to play. You get Jake Allen, Samuel Montembeault. Now you get obviously Primeau on a one-way deal. How that all affects it, I certainly recommend checking that out if you want further analysis, but there is still other reporters giving us the same information that Weeks did, that it sounds like Jake Allen and the Montreal Canadiens are engaging in conversations around an extension. Things appear to be getting close. Looks like it's going to be multi-year. I would suspect that we're probably looking at a scenario where they go for a few years with a tandem of Jake and Primeau. Maybe have Montembeault in the mix for this year. Hard to say exactly how that all plays out. But of course, in the case of Cayden Primeau, he is still waivers exempt. Even though we get a one-way contract, they'll obviously pay him more money to play in the minors if he indeed does do that. But they don't have to worry about losing him through the NHL waiver wire system. So we'll see what happens in the gold crease here for the Montreal Canadiens. But that signing and another potential signing is kind of on the horizon by the looks of things. And as I also mentioned in that video, wouldn't be shocking if Montreal acquires another goaltender as well to play in Laval. And I wouldn't also be shocked if that goalie turns out to be Michael DiPietro, who's with the Vancouver Canucks looking for a fresh start. The prospect goalie had a really solid junior career, was drafted with a lot of promise and potential. It's fallen down the depth chart in Vancouver, and seems like a fresh start is in order for both the team and the player to move on. And Montreal might be a good landing spot for the young goaltender. So we'll see how this all plays out here in the next little while leading into training camp. Word on Evan Rodriguez, arguably maybe even the top unsigned free agent out there right now. Rodriguez apparently has two teams pushing really hard to sign him. Those teams being the Anaheim Ducks and the Calgary Flames. At this point, I don't think we can completely rule out a return to Pittsburgh, although it does seem to be pretty unlikely. And as time goes on, I think it's less likely as well. I don't know how the Penguins would do it, but I've seen reports saying that it's not, they're not completely out of it. So we'll have to see where things go. But Rodriguez does have options, and we'll see how that plays out. Now, another player it looks like might be getting close to getting an extension done in St. Louis is Jordan Kyrou, entering the final year of his contract. I would suspect you're going to see him get an extension comparable, almost maybe even identical to teammate Robert Thomas. They had identical bridge deals. Their production, offensively speaking, is almost identical as well. The only difference is Thomas is a center, and quite often centermen do make a little bit more. So if it is less, it wouldn't be less by a whole lot. But Kyrou is certainly in due for a significant long-term commitment and payday from the St. Louis Blues. So that is also something that we could see here in the not-too-distant future, likely before training camp gets underway. Now, when it comes to the Senators, Jacob Chychrun, Arizona, that whole saga, still ongoing. There's a lot of people that seem to think that Ottawa is going to continue to push here, and I don't know the likelihood, but their goal is to try to get this figured out to acquire Chychrun before training camp starts. Now, most teams open their training camp, I believe it's on the 21st, which is your check-in day, medicals, all that kind of stuff. Most teams hit the ice on the 22nd for their first official practice and ice sessions. So, you don't have a lot of time, but there is still time there should you, be able to get a deal done to get the player into where they need to be, to get, in some cases you need work visas and all that stuff sorted out. So I don't expect a ton of trades before training camp, but there could be some, and Chychrun very well could be one of them. Of course, the price has to change, though. I don't think the Senators are prepared to pay that rumored asking price of multiple first-round picks, as well as a couple of prospects. I just think that's a little steep, which is why it has not happened here as of yet. But the belief was that Nikita Zaitsev would be going to the Coyotes as a salary cap dump. And I know I've seen different speculations. I know on the Wally Mathot show, Brent Wallace had talked about the fact that the Coyotes are weak in the depth piece area, I guess you could say, when it comes to goaltending. And even though the Senators have already made some other goaltending moves, that they do have a couple of young goaltenders, maybe a guy like Levi Muriel, the Finnish goaler who had a pretty good run at the World Juniors and does have a lot of potential. Maybe he becomes a piece involved that Ottawa offers up. They do have some interesting D prospects between Lassie Thompson, Bernard Docker, a few forwards in there that they're, at this point, I think they might be willing to move, but there's still, some of those prospects that I know the Senators don't want to touch in a trade, like Ridley Gregg, Jake Sanderson. They're definitely, off limits. I know they're wouldn't be crazy about trading even Robbie Harventi or even Lassie Thompson either, but I think if it really came down to it, they might in those cases. But yeah, either way, you're looking at a first rounder, maybe Merilainen, and maybe another prospect, or maybe a second round. I don't know what they would do, but the price is going to have to change. I don't think they'd want to give up multiple first round picks. But after signing Tim Stützle yesterday, they do have majority of their core locked up long term. They just want to continue to add another defenseman, but I think Pierre Dorian's kind of maybe trying to put pressure on other teams to change the price, because media-wise, and he's actually done a lot of media lately, including some smaller, podcasts and stuff, which was great to see them doing more with their fans and more outside of your couple of mainstream media members that they tend to talk to. That it seems like a case of him saying that they're prepared and happy to go into the season with the decor they have. So it's kind of making it sound like, we don't feel like we need to make a move here. So unless you want to change your asking price, we're not really going to consider it, type of thing. At least that's how I'm taking it. So we'll see. Some are convinced the deal is going to go down before or during training camp. Only time will tell. Now the Flyers and the Jets are going to be two teams that I think are going to be entertaining to watch from a perspective of, if they have a bad start, that we could see significant change early. Now, of course, both teams are entering the season with new head coaches. So I don't suspect we'd see a coaching change. You get John Tortorella in Philly, you got Rick Bowness in Winnipeg, but both GMs, I think, are fair to say, under some pressure. I know Chuck Fletcher in Philly is for sure. I don't know that we can officially say that Shovel Day Off and Winnipeg is under the hot seat, so to speak. I would think, though, that there's got to be some pressure coming from ownership, especially after missing the playoffs last year. It was their first miss, I think, in 5 seasons, I think it was. The last 4 or 5 years they had made the playoffs. So after getting used to that playoff revenue, and obviously that's really good for business and good for team growth, they took some big steps forward, and then they've just taken some major steps back the last couple of years. They haven't really had an overly active offseason in Winnipeg, and I do wonder what ownership thinks at this point. But I think it's fair to say in Philly that Tortorella is going to push that team as best he can. But I know that he, even on Sirius XM radio, was even talking about some concerns he had as well. So certainly Tortorella is going into this season with, some major concerns. And you can't help but think that if the Flyers get up to a slow start, that Chuck Fletcher's job's got to be on the line. It absolutely has to be. And we know they're going to be without Ryan Ellis. That's a given. And if you look at this roster, they do have some players that are good, but can Carter Hart bounce back and give you a solid year? That's going to be an important piece. The blue line without Ryan Ellis, they're going to continue to run with Ivan Provorov in the top pair. Can he produce? He's had a hard time the last couple of years. Talented guy, but just not getting it done offensively speaking. How's their other D going to fare with Sanheim, Ristolainen, the newly acquired Tony DeAngelo? There's lots of question marks there. And in the forward group, there's quite a mishmash of younger and veteran players, so I don't know how that's all going to fare as well. But I know I've seen some articles suggesting guys like Travis Konechny would be made available if things get off to a bad start. Now, of course, Konechny's young enough and not an outrageous contract, so I think there'd be a market for him. A guy like JVR, now that he's into the final year of his contract, if Philly's willing to eat half, a team might take him for $3.5 million. Especially, he can still score. He's not going to, he's never been overly great skater quick, but he's good around the net. He can be good in a power play, net front presence. I think there's use for him in the NHL, and maybe a $3.5 million team's considered. I don't know. There's even some talk of Kevin Hayes. I think Kevin Hayes' contract, though, would be too tough to move, especially given what he's battled through the injuries the last couple of years on top of that. But the Flyers, I do think, like I said, they've already changed the coach. They've made some moves. I think it's Fletcher's job is on the line if they get off to a slow start, but I wouldn't be shocked if he tries to make some trades early if the start is bad before it comes to him being on the chopping block. So a very interesting team. In the case of the Winnipeg Jets, I'd have to think Captain Blake Wheeler would be right near the top of the chopping list. Now, of course, some of this too, the players we're talking about, it doesn't mean that those particular players need to have bad personal starts or that they're going to be getting the blame or anything like that. They're just some of the players that would actually be tradable. Wheeler and the Jets reportedly in the offseason talked about a separation, if you will. They had agreed that it might be best for both parties to get a fresh start. It never happened, never materialized. I think obviously there's some control over Blake Wheeler's contract where he can be moved to, but obviously things never worked out. And of course, Scheifele's coming back as well. And you just have to think that if things are not going well early on, that this team might have to be like, okay, we need some drastic changes here. And those are the two guys that would have value. And if they're playing well, but the team overall isn't, it doesn't really make a difference. You don't want to look and be like, well, the team's not performing well, but it's not his fault. Why would you trade him? Because you got to trade somebody with value to get some good pieces back to kind of shake up the makeup of the team, right? So it's just that simple. But Philly and Winnipeg are two teams, I think, under a lot of pressure. The GMs are definitely under pressure. They've already made coaching changes. We didn't see, a super active offseason, really, like you would have thought, more change. And the time is going to come early on if the results aren't there. We know very much this is a results-oriented business. And when the results aren't there, there's usually hell to pay somewhere. And this time, I think it's going to be on the player rosters, maybe the GM. So let me know your thoughts on today's news and rumors down below in the comment section. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.